everyone. This is Herstory Chats at the Northville Public Library. This week, our guest is Prisca Dorcas Mojica Rodríguez. She was born in Managua, Nicaragua, but calls Nashville, Tennessee home. She got her Master's of Divinity from Vanderbilt University in the spring of 2015. To date, she has published over 200 articles online and participated in the young adult anthology, Nevertheless, We Persisted. Recently, Prisca also participated in an anthology edited by Linda Lopez titled The Fearless Rise and Powerful Resonance of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. She started the platform Latina Rebels in 2013, and currently it boasts over 300,000 organic followers online. She has been featured in Telemundo, Univision, Me Too, Huffington Post, Latino Voices, Guerrilla Feminism, Latina Mag, Cosmopolitan, Everyday Feminism, and was invited to the White House in the fall of 2016. She is unapologetic, angry, and uncompromising about protecting and upholding the stories of Latinx communities. Currently, Prisca is writing her first full-length book with Seal Press, a subsidiary of Hatchet Book Group, due to be out in fall 2021. So impressive.
It's a lot.
But it's worth telling. Can you describe Latina Rebels and tell me about how and why it all got started?
Yeah. So actually started it in Cinco de Mayo 2013. I was in my graduate program and I felt like I was learning life-changing knowledge that I resented that I had to go to this elite PWI and feel accosted by white people constantly to get access to all this knowledge. So I was just like, I want to make a page that not only democratize all that knowledge, but also challenges notions of respectability by living into it instead of just talking about it. So Latinx media in 2013 looks so different than it looks today. I mean, there was no Me Too, there was no BuzzFeed's Pero Like section, there was none of that. Like, we just kind of had white media replicated, but with Spanish language,
Mm-hmm.
which I was like, that doesn't represent me. That doesn't get to the like. I'm funny. I'm sexual. I'm smart. I'm raunchy. Like I am a complex person, and none of this media is capturing that. So I was tired of Cinco de Mayo being the one year where the white students recognized my humanity in like this weird racist trope kind of way.
Mm-hmm.
So I was just angry and I went to my room and I just like created Latina Rebels in like 2 seconds. It was like a very quick decision.
Mm-hmm.
I called my sister and two of my friends and was like, hey, you guys want to do this and start posting whatever you're already posting, because they were already feminist leaning or whatever. And I just wanted different perspectives. I also didn't want it to be a vacuum where I was just like, everything I say is representative of all of us, because that's not true.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it was really quickly, and I never expected this fun project that I had to make community to become kind of what it has become today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, that's the beauty of the internet. And you would think that those things would already exist, right? But at some point, someone like you has to just get it started.
Yeah, yeah. And then there's a million of those now.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm like, okay, okay. Inception, we were at the beginning.
Is there an historic female identifying person whom you find inspirational or whose story has influenced or impacted you? And can you tell me about them, since it is History Month?
Yeah, I have two. I've been thinking about this a lot because I tend to usually say like my mom or my grandma with these kinds of questions, but I'm like, it's Women's History Month, I'm gonna give you some history.
Mhm.
So I write about, okay, I guess I don't know which one to start with, but I have two. And one is La Malinche. She has a few names. Historians haven't really found a lot of uh, her own evidence that she existed. It's just kind of through oral traditions that they've like pieced together stuff. She goes by Malinal, La Doña Maria, or La Malintzin, and it was an indigenous Aztec girl who was sold by her mom when the dad died, who was a chief, Aztec chief, and she was sold to slavery to the Spanish, the conquistadores, and so she became a translator and kind of saved these Spanish conquistadors several times from possibly being killed just by understanding the language, the people, and then she was a liaison in a lot of ways, but she had no agency. And so she was constantly raped and constantly, she wasn't her own person. And when these Spanish people left her, she stayed. A lot of the people thought she was a traitor, which it assumes that she had agency, which she didn't. She was really young when she was sold. And what she did, and this is a part of history, like some people deny this part of it and some people say that it did happen, but she killed all the children that she birthed through all these assaults. And I think growing up in school, I needed to hear more about women who didn't behave in the ways that we expect, women who screamed and fought and resisted at every corner, and whose stories aren't nice, whose stories aren't like, we're gonna tell this is the beautiful story of blah blah blah. But that's what, in school they just want to indoctrinate you, and they don't give you the controversial figures and the controversial women who said, no, I won't do this, and this is not okay. And I learned about her in grad school, and I wish I had learned about her growing up. And another one for me is Sojourner Truth. I didn't know who Sojourner Truth was until I was like 28 years old, which is pretty old. If you're being taught history properly, like you should know who Sojourner Truth is. And she was a Black abolitionist and a feminist in the 17 and 1800s. And she was the first woman to have sued a white man and won her case. And she sued her former owner who sold her child to slavery once, because slavery did happen in other parts of the country. It's not just the South. Other parts of the country just abolished it sooner. But she
Mhm.
was enslaved in New York, actually. And when she was freed, one of her children wasn't, so she fought to get him back, and she did, and she won, which is huge for that
Mhm.
time, and has this very known speech that we all know, ain't I a woman. And the first time I heard it, I was in seminary. A Black scholar, womanist scholar, read it, and I was, all the stuff that you're taught and you're not thinking about, like I had been really insulated all my life up until that point. And I was just like, all the things I've internalized about Black women, all the things that I have been ignorant by my own family, trying to make us better, whatever. In Latinx, it's a very anti-Black culture. I mean, anti-Blackness is worldwide, but in my context, I had just never even thought to question it. And when I heard that read by a Black womanist scholar that I really admired, I was like, this is beautiful, this is divine. We don't talk about these stories, we don't propped up these stories in school, and we should. So those were
Mhm.
my two more significant memories of being like, oh, she did that. And she lived. It was, yeah. Yeah, very shocking female figures. Yeah, it's almost like we are encouraged to be passive participants as women, and everything that we're taught shows us that.
Mhm.
I needed to see some of these women growing up. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I learned it when I did in seminary, because she was like a very big figure in the Methodist church. So that was a big reason.
Yeah.
Seminary loves their activists too.
Yeah. So that kind of leads us into the next question. So how did you learn about both of those people?
Grad school. I was always a reader though.
Mhm.
I've loved libraries all my life, and I'm a person who picks up books just because I'm like, what could this be about? And
Mhm.
still, that those women were elusive to me, and I
Mhm.
had to go to grad school and go to conferences and take classes with not the white professors to hear these other stories, and like changed my life.
Mhm. What are your favorite sources of information regarding women's histories?
I'm still a book person, but I've just gotten better at knowing what stories I won't learn. So if I read a really great book that talks about La Melinche, for example, I'm gonna go to the back and look at all their sources and go read all the books that I can possibly read.
Mhm.
And then do that, like just allow the information to propagate itself. But it's through my own filters now instead of, our white canons and our mostly white professors if you go to American universities. And so it's been kind of me finding one book and then that's expanded to a full library of books that I'm like, I can't live without them. But I think also social media, which is why I made LR, has become a really great place to distribute kind of this knowledge that is elusive to so many people in such a quick way. I think it's also up to us, though, after we get that information to go read on ourselves. Like, we shouldn't just take whatever we're hearing online. I mean, because the internet told me it must be true,
Mhm.
because that's just going to take you down a path that can be very sticky. But books are great. I love books. I suggest just diving into a few good books. I will recommend a few at the end.
All right, awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, and the more you read, the more you'll know when is a good source when you have it in front of you and what is not a good source. But it's a muscle. You just need to read and read and read and read. And
Mhm.
some people are really good at that. And some people, my husband has ADHD and he isn't great at reading. And so he has to distill his information in different ways. So find the people who have your kind of learning abilities and how they're learning. But
Mhm.
it can't be all online. That is a big thing.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So, what are your thoughts on the representation of women in literature and media?
I have so many thoughts.
Give them to me.
um
I want them all.
I think of because I'm Latina, so I'm always looking at the ways that there's gaps in Latina representation, Latinx representation. I think media only in the last 2 years has really taken a turn in featuring more Latinx stories. So, like, there's a show called Los Spookies on HBO that's
Mhm.
really great and has these Latinas in it. Or actually, I think it's all in Spanish with subtitles. So I think it's based in Mexico, but they're in LA often. They're like, I mean, when you're that close to the border and a lot of people live in that part of the world, yeah, you're
Mhm.
just gonna have that dual identity. But Los Spookies has a really interesting and complicated narrative on the women that are there, which I really like. Gente Fight on Netflix is another one that I really, really enjoyed, and that just came out like during COVID. Vida is all women writers, Latina writers, and it was on Stars. It got canceled, unfortunately, but that also were queer Latinas, which I was like, are people ready for this? Pose is a really great way that women are being shown in different ways, and it has a Latina lead, MJ Rodriguez, and it's a Latina as a trans Latina, which we don't get to be complex on television, and now we're getting all these roles that I'm like, oh,
Mhm.
people are gonna see that we're out here.
Mhm.
So yeah, I think media has done a better job. I think Netflix has really dumped a lot of money. I mean, I think they're not even making a profit at this point because they're just buying everything and anything, it feels, which is generating really amazing content,
Mhm.
which also has its flaws. But I think more in the literature world is very interesting. So also I'll say my experience um as somebody who's writing my first book with one of the big five. So publishing world has like the big five publishers. I'm publishing under Hachette, which is one of the bigger of the in the publishing world. And everything has been great. My editor is a woman, which when I was in the interview process, so when I don't know how familiar you might be with the publishing world and getting book deals and all that. I wasn't before this all happened.
Mhm.
But the way it happened for me, because I did do traditional publishing, is that my proposal went out and publishers who had an interest in me, basically I had a talk with them. A lot of people I know fly to New York to have the talks. I didn't. They didn't ask me to. It was really quick. They wanted to close the deal, so I just had a phone call conversation with all these publishers. Out of the five big ones, four were interested in buying my book, and then two other presses that were smaller. One of them being an international press. They were the ones that initially released Harry Potter. So I was in talks with all of them. I think only two of the people who I talked to were women. Only one was not white, so she was Japanese American.
Mhm.
And I felt like there was a huge disconnect, and the only person that I really connected with was my editor, the one that I picked, who is Japanese American, because she's an immigrant. And I asked her stuff that I got to pick. Because I had so much interest, I got to pick. I had power, which doesn't happen a lot for people.
Mhm. Mhm.
But I started asking questions. I was like, so how comfortable are you with somebody who doesn't speak English as a first language, who doesn't write English well? Because that isn't, and everybody just kind of stumbled on answering that.
Mhm.
And some people avoided the question. And only the editor I picked, Emmy Kanda, said, my grandma is an immigrant and I know what it's like to learn another language. I know how hard it is. I know the ridicule that people face. And she just was like, I'm going to hold your words with care and take care of you along the way. But you don't get that. And I shared that story to some of my friends, and they were shocked because they were like, I didn't think you could even say that. I didn't think there was even a possibility for an immigrant to write a book in the traditional publishing world.
Mhm.
So it's touching. I think it's touch and go. So as an immigrant, I'm also, so I went to the copy edit stage, and the copy editor only speaks English. So she sent me back on my edits, and she said I couldn't fix, because I wrote the whole thing in Spanglish, so Spanish and English. She said I couldn't
Mhm.
fix your Spanish errors that you might have.
Mhm.
So that means that in staff at one of the biggest publishers in the country doesn't have a bilingual copy editor,
Oh,
which is
wow.
mind blowing.
Yeah.
So I think there's a lot of things that are changing in literature, but not quick enough.
Mhm.
Not, and I think for women, we always have to advocate for ourselves at every turn. And if you have different intersections that are also part of your oppression,
Mhm.
sometimes you don't want to advocate for yourself. Like sometimes you
Mhm.
want the white men in these industries to just get it
Mhm.
and to foresee holes,
Mhm.
and you don't want to teach them or tell them, hey, that's not fair, that's not whatever.
Mhm.
So I think things are changing. I don't think they're changing fast enough. I think this summer really did a lot in terms of race stuff
Mhm.
in the publishing world, but I don't know what that means yet, and I haven't seen
Yeah.
it. So we will see. I think
Mhm.
as as women, we're valued for like our easygoingness. And
Mhm.
I've seen even like my husband, the way he like speaks to people when he just is like, no, that's wrong. I get surprised and I'm like, you still have a job? How does this happen?
Mhm.
But I think it's just that. It's just like the expected docility of women. And then if you're a person of color, along with being a woman, if you're queer, along with being a woman, like all that just keeps adding up and adding up. And I think we're starting to have change, but not enough of us are in positions of power to do more.
Yeah. So you were talking about sort of like finding resources for yourself, and what are the types of things that you look for when you're sort of screening what type of information is what you consider maybe good or interesting information for you?
I hate to say it. So JSTOR made a lot of stuff available for free during COVID. And JSTOR I think is a really I'm in the humanities. That's like I'm not a scientist, I'm not a mathematician. So I think JSTOR is a really good place for information and also for finding where, like I said, go to bibliographies. But JSTOR has a lot of reputable information that will kind of point you in the right directions. You can't print it. So JSTOR is usually only available to people enrolled in college and university. So you can't print it if you're using the free service that they give you, that they've started giving normal people like us.
Mhm.
But go to their resources and start looking at those books. And your library can do interlibrary loans. There's a lot of ways, because a lot of public libraries don't have more of these dense academic books, but you can request them. So
Mhm.
start there, JSTOR, and start requesting these books. Yeah, I think a great tip if you're ever going to read academic books is read out loud.
Mhm.
So I'll throw that out there as my tip for because it is like you're gonna find, unfortunately, there aren't you're gonna find the mainstream books and then the academic books. And the mainstream books are great, but they're just gonna leave crumbs in a way that an academic book is gonna go into depth about those crumbs.
Mhm. One of the things that I would do is I would walk while I was reading a book, which sounds like a
Same.
yeah
No, it
trip or
works.
whatever, but it helps to like keep me focused on what I'm reading and stay awake.
Same. I've done that. If I've printed an article, I'll pin it to a wall and sit and read it out loud. Like I can't even look down because it's so hard to read sometimes that you have to read it multiple times or really slowly that
Mhm.
your even body will be like, "No, this isn't normal."
Mhm.
So,
Or sometimes not even reading the whole thing, just kind of learning the table of contents or the index to sort of like zoom in on exactly what you want to read about.
and there's YouTube videos now on how to do speed skimming, which is a
Mhm.
really good skill that I learned in grad school.
Mhm.
So I definitely recommend going to YouTube and figuring out how to speed skim by like people who have to read like 100 books a semester.
Mhm.
So yeah, there's skills, there's ways to do it. It's
Mhm.
just we don't know where those resources are. So
Mhm. Well, thank you for all those tips. I think people will find it useful. So, speaking of libraries, like to see libraries do to improve representation for marginalized groups?
so I love this question. I'm gonna go more big picture for it. So over the summer, a book released called American Dirt. It was a novel written by somebody who identifies as white. Later came out saying that her grandmother, I think, was Puerto Rican, but didn't position herself as Latina. She got $1 million book deal by Macmillan, which I should know. I was offered a book deal by Macmillan, and they only offered me 25,000 to tell my
Ah.
immigrant story.
Mhm.
So she told this story about a mother and child crossing the border, and like really relied on stereotypes because she is an outsider. I think she said she went to Mexico for like 20 days. That was it. And people were really upset. A lot of people, especially immigrants whose stories don't get told from our perspective. Other people sort of tell our stories. Oprah's book club, which has become its own New York Times bestseller, they had it on their list, which enraged people because Oprah's book club has never had an immigrant written book by an immigrant.
Mm-hmm.
So, it was a huge thing, and I think my point is, I think librarians and libraries need to be aware of social things that are happening in the world. So, this topic was viral on Twitter, and so apparently Oprah's book club had reached out to a library in McAllen, Texas, because they're a border town, and they wanted to do a cross promotion with them. And they said like doing a unveiling, and they didn't know what the book was, but they said yes, of course. It's a library, it's a book, we'll be part of it. It's Oprah's book club. And
Mm-hmm.
when they got the book and they realized that it was this really controversial book that you could easily find all the controversy online, they pulled away and they said they weren't going to be a part of it. And I have never clapped so hard for a library in my life. And you see the video of them talking about it. There's like videos, and it's these like older women. It's all women saying, "No, we won't participate in the silencing and the marginalization of immigrants."
Mm-hmm.
And I haven't seen that enough. So I think libraries need to be more aware of what's happening on Twitter and on social media, and on because the publisher tried to silence a lot of the stuff that was coming out because they spent $1 million to get this book written. That's a lot of money. That means they need to
Mm-hmm.
they ensured that they were going to print out a certain amount. Every celebrity online was taking pictures with American Dirt. Like their marketing team put everything into this book. They backed it. And this book not doing well was not going to look good for them.
Mm-hmm.
So I loved it. I think libraries need to be more aware of what's happening, and they need to be willing to decline participation in things to show solidarity. Like it has to be a real tangible solidarity, not just like we stand with BPOCs. Here's our Black History Month list of books in the front. That's great, but we need a lot more.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, even if it's not like a moral qualm, it's just more factual, right? To have someone who was actually an immigrant to tell the story of immigrants.
Yeah,
Of
exactly.
course, there's like, people talk about creative freedom and anyone should be able to tell any type of story. And that's fine as long as people who are immigrants also get book deals and get to tell their stories too.
Get $1 million book deal. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. You would think that that would be premium, right? Is like straight from the source.
Yeah. Yeah.
We still have work to do.
Yes.
All right. So are there any books or movies about or by women that you'd like to recommend to our patrons for Women's History Month?
Yes. I'm gonna say some books and movies, but also I'm gonna just give names because I think it's important. Some authors we only will gravitate towards their quote unquote more popular book when
Mhm.
there's like Audre Lorde, a prolific writer. I can give you like names of some of the books that everybody recognizes, but I'm just like, no, go find Audre Lorde wherever you can. And everything with Audre Lorde's name on it, pick it up.
Mhm.
So I think Alice Walker is one of my favorite authors. The Color Purple, the movie and the book are phenomenal. The ways that Black women can tell their stories is something to be admired. So Alice Walker, author, Black activist, go get The Color Purple, the book and the movie. My favorite movie. Anything by Cherry Moraga. She's a feminist theorist and a Chicana. I think anything by Gloria Naylor, she's a novelist. So if you like more novels and not academic stuff, Gloria Naylor is one of the, I mean, she paints with words. So highly recommend. I call her a weaver of truths. Bell Hooks, another great, anytime you see a Bell Hooks book, pick it up. And you might not be ready for it. I picked up one about unloving men, or I forget what the exact title is. I have it behind me. I should probably just turn around. Oh, All About Love. I was not ready to read Bell Hooks All About Love when I first picked it up, because sometimes these books will take you to places and trauma that you're not ready to deal with.
Mhm.
But yeah, pick up anything you can about Bell Hooks. I now read it many years after I first picked it up, and I was like, wow, this is beautiful. I was ready for this today.
Mhm.
Jessica Salgado is a poet, Salvadorian. She's a self-proclaimed fat fly poet. So, if you want to feel represented, if you're a person in a bigger body and you want to see your stories told with your bigger body also part of the narrative,
Mhm.
Jessica Salgado will make you weep. Maria Pilar Aquino is a phenomenal Mexican theologian. She writes in Spanish and in English. So if you're a bilingual person, or if you want to get more radical information on the church and feminist theory, I highly recommend you get this for yourself and if you have a Spanish speaking relative, an older relative, I'll get it for them.
Mhm.
It will rock the world. And I think Ansaldúa is also a really great, she's a controversial figure, but she's a really great storyteller and poet. And anything by her is just gonna change your life, I think.
Wow, that you gave us a lot.
Yeah.
Hopefully something for everyone. Um, is there anything you can tell us about your upcoming book, For Brown Girls with Sharp Edges and Tender Hearts?
So, you know, that whole conversation we had about like how academic books are really hard and they're really dense and they're not in libraries,
Mhm.
um, especially public libraries. So I wanted to write a book that was going to end up in a public library, but it was going to break down all this academic jargon. And so I call it my little kernels that I'm leaving. And I do tell in my intro and in my conclusion, I say, go read my biography, go find the thing that struck with you. I have like an extensive notes section. So the whole book is going to be stories. And at the end, it's just dense notes saying, this is the theory I'm referencing in this particular line. This is the theory. So I'm trying to just give a roadmap for people to understand or find an entrance to academic language.
Mhm.
Um, but it can be found in like an airport bookstore.
Mhm.
So that's a little bit of it.
Well, that sounds super exciting because I think part of what's so daunting about uh, trying to learn about a new subject, especially at a more sort of intense, in-depth level, is not knowing where to start. You know,
Yeah.
where, yeah. So I think having it told as a story makes it more so that you have this like framework, and then you can sort of plug in the more detailed information into that framework that you've already established.
Yeah. And someone you trust too, because I'd like to know who's recommending this book. Why? What did they say about it?
Mm-hmm.
So it's me. You can find me online everywhere. You know, you can see what I'm about if you go to Latina Rebels on Instagram and Facebook and Twitter. So you'll find me as the source
Mm-hmm.
for more sources. So
Mm-hmm.
hopefully through my visibility, people can like figure out if they will or won't trust the sources I give out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and people come in all the time wanting to know what should I read next. So I think having another resource outside the library is will be helpful for some people.
Yeah.
And before we leave, I wanted to say that I was very moved and inspired by your essays in AOC, The Fearless Rise and Powerful Resonance of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. And in Nevertheless, We Persisted. Um, I'm not going to go into detail because I think people should just read it because it's not just what you're saying, it's how you're saying it. You really are a great storyteller, and I think people should get a firsthand experience of that. So for anyone who would like to read them, they are both available in our system to check out.
Yay!
Thank you so much for meeting with me. This is very enlightening, and I think you have a perspective that is, it's different from mine. I learned things today, and I hope that the people who watched are also learning things too.
Yay! Thank you so much for having me. This was really fun and different than what I get to do normally.